Hello and welcome to this demonstration of the Pepper white label mobile apps. My name is Adam Robinson and I'm going to be taking you through this demonstration where we'll cover one way that we surface the power of the Pepper platform, and that's through the most commonly used clients consuming it, which are these white label mobile applications. I'm going to be using this Taylor Street Baristas demo application. Taylor Street are one of our early adopters who've worked very closely with us to develop this application. So you'll see the branding as we go through. And that's one of the key things that you'll see is none of this is Pepper branded. Everything that we do in the app is branded for our merchants. We don't want to have the brand relationship with the merchant's customers. It's the loyalty brand that the customer has the relationship with, and that's what drives the power of the app. So I'm going to take you through step by step. We have a progressive and informative onboarding journey. And what I mean by that is that we present some basic information to guide the user in, to tell them what they're going to be able to do with the app. And then we start capturing information from the user during the onboarding process. When I say this is progressive, it's because we capture the information that we need and we tell the user what they're going to need to put in to be able to use the app. But we do that so that by the time the user has finished this onboarding journey, they're in a point where they're ready to transact. I'll show you what that means now. I have the ability to sign up from here. We ask for a very small pieces of information here, the minimum information that we need to take the user through the sign up process. Actually, I'm going to sign in because I already have an account. I'm just going to sign in using my mobile credentials. We provide for 3 different types of credentials in the app, as well as mobile. We have Facebook for a single sign-on login, and we also have email credentials for sign-in as well. Currently in the mobile apps, we have mobile and Facebook implemented because that's the most logical to have on the mobile apps, and it provides for a more seamless validation as well. Easier for us to validate that a user's mobile is unique, whereas an email address can be a little bit more vague in validation. So we now have the rest of these progressive onboarding pieces where we're going to explain to a user what we're asking for and ask them for various permissions. So we'll ask them for notification permissions that we can send them marketing notifications. We'll ask them for location permissions, which is used for a couple of key journeys in the app, and I'll explain that shortly. I'm going to say always and allow that. Now we ask for a payment type. We ask for the payment type so that when the user gets to the home page, they are in that position and ready to transact. We're quite clear that they can skip it because we do have some users who that would cause friction to if we didn't. But I'm going to go through and add a credit card. I'm going to add a credit card here. Now I can add a test credit card at this point. So this obviously wouldn't work if you were to try and use it in production. My card is added. I'm now in a position where I could transact if I wanted to. So I'm now on the home page and I'm ready to go. So the home page structure of the app, just to explain a few things about the information that you're seeing on here. Firstly, we have the location carousel up at the top here. This location carousel is it has 2 purposes. Firstly, you can see the buttons below it, the check-in button and actually the order button as well. They're changing contextually, so that if I was to hit order now, I'd be ordering from St. Paul's, whereas if I was to order now, I would be ordering from Bank. The second purpose of that is to actually show some detail to the user. If I tap on that location in the banner, then it's going to show the location detail page, and I can then deep link into things like the locations. I can get directions to it, I can search for things. If I hit directions, it's going to use whatever appropriate app the user has on their phone. So if they're in London and they have Citymapper installed, it's going to launch Citymapper, whereas if they're not, it might launch Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever is appropriate. So straight from that location carousel at the top, you can get to some quite deep functionality fairly quickly. When you show the 3 closest locations, and that's one of the reasons that we ask for the location permissions during the onboarding journey, is so that we can show the user's closest locations there. And we do that because in other apps that we've seen out there in the industry, it defaults to the first closest location, but we know from user feedback that's not necessarily the location that they want to order from or to pay in store for. People may be walking towards a location, there may be a location that's en route, and the closest location actually might be one that's behind them. So by showing the 3 closest locations, we just deal with that a little bit better. It is also possible by going into the side menu to see all of the locations by tapping on the locations menu entry here, and then getting an explore journey where you can search for or go through a list and see all of those locations. So that's the locations carousel at the top. At the bottom, we have this banner. Now, there's only one banner configured on here. This banner is actually a scrollable carousel. If I was to slide left and right on it, I only have one banner configured. The banner is designed to show audience and segment specific marketing information, and it can either link out to a website that's configured in our Pepper web console, or it can link out to in-app content. So you can put an article in there, you can put information about the company, about the locations, anything you really feel is important to market to your users. These 4 then, in the centre, the 4 buttons, these are what we refer to as the anchor buttons, and you can see I've got order, check-in, I have my balance, and I have my loyalty cards. The balance and the loyalty cards are supporting information for those other journeys. They're used during the order and the check-in journey, so I'll show you those first. The balance just allows me to top up. So I added a card when I was going through my onboarding journey, and I can now top that up by £20 or £30, and it will use that stored tokenized card to go off to the API from the connected payment provider and process that transaction. It is possible to implement the Pepper app without a stored value, so you don't have to have the stored balance in the app. Some merchants, where they have a higher average transaction value, they may prefer to have it on a pay-as-you-go basis, where every transaction is paid for by the card that's been stored against the profile. It's just a configuration option that we would go through a process of deciding during onboarding of the merchant how that's configured. The second piece there is the loyalty cards. Now, loyalty cards and the loyalty that you have in the platform is obviously part of the whole power of what Pepper do as a platform. We have the ability to award multiple different types of loyalty for stamp cards and pseudocurrency. We can add ad hoc perks, which allow you to really push the power of surprise and delight loyalty rather than earn and burn loyalty. And we have things like club loyalty and loyalty level tiers and corporate discounts, lots of different things. We'll cover that in much more detail in a separate video at a later point. So the 2 primary journeys that we've got in here are order your drink and check-in. You can see it's got here check-in at Monuments. All I'm going to do is just go to St. Paul's, and I'm going to hit check-in at St. Paul's. What that does when I check in is it will now ask me if in the future I want to be automatically checked into St. Paul's. So I can change that afterwards, but I'm going to say OK. What then happens is every time I walk into the St. Paul's store, Pepper will implement Bluetooth beacons that we put onto the walls in the store, and we'll put a geotagged radius around the location as well, which means that our app gets a notification from iOS or Android, whichever its platform is installed on, to tell it that the user has just ranged into that location. We will then automatically check them in. What that allows us to do is to push a notification back to the user to say, oh, hey, it looks like you've just walked into St. Paul's, don't forget to use the app to pay your own loyalty. And the purpose of that is that this check-in process replaces what you see in some other apps of a barcode scan. So with some apps, for example, the Starbucks app or the Costa app, you would scan a barcode that shows in the app at the point of sale. whereas this means that you're not having to present your phone. This can even happen without taking the phone out of your pocket if you have auto check-in turned on. On the point of sale, that then will present a list of the currently checked in users to the cashier, who can then select which user to attach to the basket. We'll demonstrate that in a separate video later on for the appropriate point of sale that you're interested in using alongside the Pepper reference app. So I'll check that out, and I'm now checked out of that location. So the ordering process loads a pre-order menu. Pre-order can be enabled on a per location basis, and the menus can be on a per location basis as well. You can have different menus for different locations, and there's various levels of information you can have on a menu. At its most basic, you might have items like the caramel cortado here that don't have very much information on them, but you may have an item like the cortado which has a short description, but also when you launch that item has an image, it has modifiers. If you open up the more information here, it has tags associated with it, it has nutritional information as well. So it's quite an information-rich menu that does flex to menus that don't have that information if they need to be displayed. We have filters on here as well, so those tags that I showed you on the items can be filtered. So quite importantly for dietary requirements and allergen requirements, we can have those as tags on here, and they can be grouped differently as well. So I've just got two groups of may contain or suitable for. You could have a third group of allergens, and that's just configurable in the menu. I can have favourites as well. We find that users like to add favourites for their regular drinks, especially with coffee or with quick service restaurants. People have their regulars that they like to configure with their modifiers for. So when you add a favourite, you can then select your item, and you can choose your modifiers, and you can add that to your favourites. If I was to edit my favourites, I can then remove one of my favourites if I want to as well. That's done. I now only have that one favourite. When I add a favourite to my basket, it just adds it straight away. It doesn't ask me for those modifiers, because the whole point is that it makes it quicker than it would otherwise be. If I select cortado though, as I showed you before, I have the option for my modifiers, and I'm going to select, or I want to guessed beans, and I'm going to have skimmed milk. These modifiers have all sorts of different settings for what they can display. They can be single select, multi-select, mandatory, optional, priced, unpriced. So you can really reflect how your menu needs to be constructed very well within these pre-orders. If I add that to my basket, you can see now I've got my indicator at the bottom that tells me I have two items in my basket. That's the caramel cortado, which is my favourite, and the cortado that I added from the menu. So if I go into my basket, before it actually shows me the basket, it's going to show me what we call a complementary item, or an upsell item. We have in the menu a concept where items can be related to each other, as can categories as well. And you can relate that however you like. So you could relate a category to an item, and you could say all coffees go well with a croissant, or you could relate an item to an item. So you could say a croissant goes well with a cortado. And then in the basket, when the user enters the basket, we will show one of those complementary items to the user. We aren't persistent with it, so if the user says no and then comes back into it, we're not going to keep offering that to them. So it's done in a way that they get offered these complementary items, but not in a way that irritates them if they're coming into the basket and out of it again. There's quite a lot of logic built into it. If I say to add it to the basket, it's going to show me a bit more detail about the item, and then I can add that to my basket. I now have those three items: my caramel cortado, and my croissant. I have the ability to leave a tip here as well. My tip is set as a default of 12.5%. You can change that in the basket here if I change that to 15%, and it will ask me whether I want to set that for my default tip for future purchases. So I can say yes, I'll set that, and that's it, that's done. So I'll confirm that and pay. If I don't have sufficient balance, then it's going to ask me to top up my account in order to place the order. confirm that. And my order confirmation comes back to me. You may have noticed that the order changed to a state of pending briefly. We do that so that if we're having a point of sale system we're connected to where it's taking some time to respond, the user knows that their order is in a pending state, and then they will get a confirmation back when their order has been placed. So if we are having a 30-second or a 1-minute delay from the point of sale, that's then reflected back to the user that they know that if they were to walk in 30 seconds later that the store may not necessarily have their order. So my order displays with a countdown of ready in 3 to 6 minutes. That's definable in our web console as to what that delay is, and that's based on one static countdown time. We don't try to vary that time dynamically, because as soon as you start to try and get very, very accurate with that, you have to be accurate 100% of the time for it to be meaningful for a user. That will count down until it will say your order should be ready now for you, and then it will, after that, a few minutes, it will reset itself back to the default state, which is order now. So that's the order and the check-in journey. Now I showed you the loyalty cards briefly before and some of the different models we had in there. And I also mentioned these banners down at the bottom here, that the banners are targetable at an audience segment. We also have a couple of other marketing pieces that are associated with that. In the side menu here we have the ability to refer a friend. We have the ability to redeem a voucher as well. Those two things are all very closely tied into these audiences and the perks. At the heart of the Pepper platform we have something called actions. An action is any significant user action, and that could be placing an order like I just did, or checking in, or earning a reward, or redeeming an award. There's any number of different things that can be actions. We have about 25 different types of significant user action, and for each of those we record a whole load of metadata, data associated with that action. So if it's a purchase, that might be the basket contents and the price and the location and the time of day and the age of the user, various different things that we'll associate with it. The reason that's important is because we then use that as a behavioural rule evaluation engine to drop people into appropriate audiences. So we will put people into an audience based on their behaviour. So it might be that I'm a regular at the St Paul's location. So if I've purchased at St Paul's more than 3 times within the last week, I may get automatically dropped into that audience, and that can be on a rolling basis. So I may get dropped out of it after a few weeks. It's important to understand that because the membership of those audiences is then fed into all of these things. So it's fed into my perks, it's fed into my banners at the bottom here, and also it can be manipulated with the voucher redemption as well. So there's actually 3 ways of somebody having one of these perks or being added into one of the audiences. The first way is through these rule evaluations. You can set up these rules to grant somebody a perk if they have purchased on a certain number of times or on certain days, or to add them into an audience as well. And that's what's actually used to grant our club membership or our loyalty tier perks, for example. You can add somebody into one of these audiences or grant them a perk by redeeming one of these vouchers. So you can put voucher codes out on marketing information, on emails, whatever channel you want to use to get out to your potential customers, and then use that as an adoption tool to get people into redeeming these voucher codes in the app. And you can also put people into these audiences manually. So if I have a look on here, for example, with the Taylor Street Baristas demo app, there's this coffee bond perk which gets people a free coffee and a cake once a week. And if that was a VIP perk, it's possible to manually drop people into that perk through the Pepper web console by manually editing their profile and then putting them into that audience. And in a separate video, we'll cover the Pepper web console, how these audiences and perks, and the actions that control them, how all of those are configured to really let you manipulate the power of the platform to let that shine through into the app. And the key thing to remember with all of this, as I've gone through it, Everything's merchant branded. There's no Pepper branding in here. As you can see, this is all branded per the Taylor Strict Baristas demo brand. And the content and the copy, the imagery and the branding is all taken from the Pepper web console and then applied to our white label app. None of it is hard-coded into the app. So that's a very brief introduction to the Pepper white label app. As I say, there'll be other videos in this series of videos where we cover the configuration of this and the options that are available through the web console, the integration to point of sale and how this can be used in store, and then also developer options and how we make this enterprise ready to be integrated into other business systems. I hope that's been useful for you. If you do have any questions at all, then we're always available at Pepper to answer those for you.